Hey, welcome back to Diabolic Shrimp, the least professional talk show on the internet. I'm your host, best-selling author and comic creator Josh Grant, and today, our special guest. I'm really excited about this. I'm a huge video game fan. I'm a huge nerd, and our today's guest is also a longtime Diabolic Shrimp member. One of my earlier reviews, Mr. Haris Orkin. Many of you might have actually heard of him without ever realizing it, maybe, if you're a huge video game fan like myself. Just a bit about him before we bring him on. Haris Orkin has had a storied career in writing and directing. He got his start writing plays and eventually creating works for Disney, as well as many other prominent studios. From there, Haris moved into the realm of video games. He has written and produced more legendary games than I can count, including Dungeons and Dragons, Kingdom Hearts, Mafia 3, Command and Conquer Red Alert, Dead Island, Call of Juarez, Hard West, Dying Light, and Tom Clancy's The Division, amongst many others, which is hard to believe because so many already great popular games. He has won numerous awards for his work and has even been nominated for a BAFTA award, which is just a huge accomplishment. So before we bring Haris on, I wanted to share with you just a couple of our highlighted books. Right here we have Monologues for Adults, 60 original monologues to stand out, inspire, and shine by Mike Kimmel. Mike Kimmel, if you've been a member of this channel for a while, he was our actual very first interview. He acted on Jay Leno and did all that. And so Monologues for Adults is an original collection of performance pieces featuring relatable, real-world topics applicable to adults. These 60 new scripts are gender neutral, require no costumes or props, and discuss ethical questions ideal for deep thinkers to explore. Check that out down there in the description. You can find a link for that. Our next highlighted book here is actually mine. I'm still running a Kickstarter for another zombie apocalypse. This is a comic is going to be coming out in October, but we're running a Kickstarter where you can actually be drawn as a zombie. That Kickstarter is ending on April 12th. So if you still want to be drawn as a zombie, now is your time. You can go check out the Kickstarter, also down there in the description. So come join us for that. It's a lot of fun. I wanted to immortalize you as a zombie. And since we're going to be talking a bit of a Dying Light and Dead Island, which Haris Orkin wrote today, maybe you might want to be part of the zombie verse. And last up, we're going to be talking all about this today. You Only Live Once by Haris Orkin. It's a whole series, spy series, also a lot of humor, tons of fun. So definitely check that out. So we have Haris Orkin on today. If you want to ask him a question, this is a live show. So by all means, over there in the live chat, throw Haris a question. We'll put him in the hot seat, send him a comment, and I would love to share that with him. But without further ado, let's bring him on. Haris, welcome to Diabolic Shrimp.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh, it's so great to have you.
Very good. Very good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, well, and I told Haris he has to, even if his house is on fire, he has to be here. So he's trapped with us today, the poor man. And well, Haris, you've been with Diabolic Shrimp actually way back since towards the beginning. You're actually like my 29th review on the site. I'm up to over 1,000 now reviews, and so you were there in the early days. So we're gonna talk about You Only Live Once. But first, I always think a great way to introduce people is through show and tell. Did you bring us anything today?
I did. I had a hard time deciding. I kind of settled between two things.
50 things.
Yeah, I have 515 things. That'll pretty much fill up the entire hour. So first, I have this is Kane bobblehead from the Command and Conquer series.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Kane is the big, heavy in all those games. And so when I worked on the Command and Conquer, they gave me this Kane bobblehead.
Oh, that's too fun.
Yeah, that's pretty much most of my income from them was this. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. EA was not that generous. So that's right.
Back.
All right, and then this is
video games. Yes, Grogu.
yeah. So yeah, this is the actual. He's in a coma. So, but this is like. And yeah, my wife got this for me because she knows who I am. It's like, yeah,
You're secretly the Mandalorian. You heard
I
it here
am.
first.
Yep.
So I'm assuming since you got Kane for working on Command and Conquer, now I'm assuming you're working on a Star Wars game. I'm just gonna leave it at that. No.
I've been up for a few, so but no, hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially since EA's been kind of running that. I think after your experience
Yeah.
earlier, maybe you
Yeah.
don't. So, well, oh gosh, Harris, I was like, I was having a hard time like limiting my scope of questions for you because I'm a huge fan. I used to play Command and Conquer Red Alert actually, and
Oh,
so
you did?
that's
Well,
actually what I knew you for originally when I originally reviewed your work, and so but as I was looking, I was like, oh, Kingdom Hearts. I'm a huge Kingdom Hearts fan. I'm like, oh, I was like, Dying Light. And my nephew is a massive Dying Light fan. So I definitely want to ask you about games. We're also going to talk a lot about You Only Live Once and the whole James Flynn series, like the whole spy series that you wrote. Many people might not know that you actually wrote novels as well. And so I want to make sure I highlight those things. So Harris, there's so much to get to in your amazing life and career, but let's start way back at the beginning. What got you into writing and art world in the first place?
oh, writing just generally or writing video games?
I would just
Just
say writing just generally because I know you did a lot of like plays and advertising and
mm,
radio. So tell us just
yeah.
what got you in originally.
I just always, from the time I was a little kid, I loved writing stories and making things up. And when I went to college, I thought about being I was going to be a lawyer. I studied international relations and economics, and I worked at law firms in the summer. And after spending like 4 summers in Chicago working at law firms, mostly as a messenger, I decided against that career, and I decided I wanted to try to maybe make a. I wasn't sure how I'd make a living as a writer. I ended up going into
Said
radio.
every writer ever,
Right,
right?
right, right. So yeah, so I worked in radio news for a little while, and then I kind of got myself into advertising, which was fun. I got to just make shit up all the time, and get things produced, and I mostly did comedy advertising, which was fun. So yeah, that's kind of that's kind of how I. And while I was working as in advertising, I knew I wanted to try to break into screenwriting. So well, for one thing, I went to graduate school for writing, which is probably a huge waste of money, but I did it. And at USC, and I got an MFA from there. And but the best part about that, and I think for any writing school, is I made a lot of contacts.
Uh-huh.
Met a lot of people who went on to become producers and directors, and so it kind of helped get my screenwriting career off the ground eventually.
Yeah, and that's
Um,
something I connect with you on that. I used to be an actor, and that's something I noticed about. It's like someone asked me not so long ago, actually, what should you go to school for acting? And I said, well, it's one of those industries, any creative industries like that, where it's like honestly it's 50-50. It's like sometimes you can make it on your own. It's the will is what it's all about. And then but if you go to school, one of the nice things is those connections. But now I really want to see you need to develop now a video game like Law School Intern, the video game where lots of side quests delivering stuff.
Oh yeah, well, I worked in Chicago, like in the winter, as a messenger, and that was not that. And
Can't be
because of that,
pleasant.
honestly, most of the other messengers for the other law firms were actually like mentally challenged people.
Yeah.
Um, and I was one of the few who wasn't.
All right. So you
Though,
think?
though, though some people may dispute that. And I
Yeah.
remember going to deliver things at law firms around town, and people would talk very slowly to me, thinking that I needed to be talked to slowly to understand what they were saying. So, yeah, but after, and a lot of times there was this really elderly partner in the firm who, after lunch, always left, forgot his hat. So every day I'd have to go retrieve his hat from whatever fancy restaurant he had lunch in. So
This, like I said, it needs to work its way into a game as like a side
yeah,
quest. Like
yeah,
retrieve the hat. It's just your
exactly.
own internal joke there. So all right. So let's talk just briefly about your books, and we'll get to them much more later here. So your book series, for those that haven't read it, I really enjoyed it. It's like it's a really fun, like kind of kind of spy thing. It's like it's actiony, but it's also got like a great deal of humor too. So it's clearly inspired partially after James Bond. So do you personally have a favorite James Bond or favorite James Bond flick?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say I started watching James Bond movies when Sean Connery was James Bond. You know, I was
So
kind of too
never
young.
never say never again, right? No,
Well, yeah, yeah,
that's
exactly.
where I started.
Oh, did you really? No, I
Yeah,
started. Well, so I started, but I watched. You know, when the first ones came out, I was like too young. My parents wouldn't let me go.
yeah.
So I think I don't know. I think maybe it was Diamonds Are Forever was the
Mm.
first one I saw with the. But yeah, I just love. And I but when I finally saw the earlier Sean Connery movies, I love those Thunderball and Goldfinger and all those. So yeah, and yeah, so I just was a huge. And you know, that was the time I was very impressionable in the 60s where there was like James Bond spurred on this huge like spy kind of, it's kind of like Star Wars did with sci-fi.
Hmm.
And there was Man from Uncle, there was Wild Wild West, there were all these different you know, shows on at the time. So
Which I
and,
think is funny because it's like nowadays kind of feel like James Bond has kind of gone into the decline, but all these other spy thrillers have been like cropping up lately.
yeah, I mean, you know, it's just like it's a perennial like genre. So,
Hmm.
and you know, and I also based the books on Don Quixote, actually. So to me, it was I wanted to figure out a way to do an updated modern day Don Quixote, and I thought, you know, who would if someone was out of their mind, would they think they might instead of being like a knight errant? I thought, you know. Who would he'd be James Bond probably? He'd be someone. He'd be an international super spy. So I just thought of you know I kind of just explore you know went from there and thought if a mental patient thought he and I you know thought he was out of his thought he was James Bond, how would that proceed?
Oh,
And I
I
read
thought it's an autobiography.
it's not it's not
just...
and I wrote it as a screenplay originally actually because I had spent you know a good amount of time writing screenplays, spec
Mhm.
screenplays in Hollywood, and I got a lot of good. You know, a lot of people loved it, but I didn't. You know, and I got an option, but it didn't get made. And it got me a lot of other work. But and then later, I you know I just loved the character so much I didn't want to let it just sit in a drawer with my other you know spec screenplays that didn't get made. So I decided I would turn it into a novel. You know, and it was a
Yeah, and
yeah.
it's a fantastic novel. Like I say, people can check out my review of that on there too. It's like amongst the many other
Oh
reviews.
yeah.
It's a
Here's the
really
cover
yeah.
by the way.
Hold it up. I was like, and I'll
I
show it
will.
again later here.
And
And so
this is the second book in the series.
yeah, and then you have a third one too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's coming out in June.
Yeah,
So
and it's a fun series, and so and we're definitely going to dive more into that in just a minute here. So let's talk a little bit about getting there to like novels. You were you worked on all these great video games. I'm a huge Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts fan personally. And I saw in your early career you worked on a Kingdom Hearts game. Like which Kingdom Hearts did you work
well,
on,
you
and
know
what
what?
was that
It
experience?
was a very, you know, it was a kind of a, it wasn't one of the main games. It was a mobile game, actually.
Uh
It was
huh.
really the second game I worked on. And, but because it was a mobile hearts, I had to, and I did it through Disney and I had written some scripts for Disney. So they kind of knew me
Uh
and
huh.
and I had written one other game before then, called Dungeons and Dragons, Dragon Shards. So
Mm-hmm.
since I'd written a video game and I'd written scripts, they brought me into work and it was you know it was like a mobile pre-smartphone game honestly
Yeah.
and it but it's still the graphics were pretty good. I mean they were like maybe PlayStation 1 type graphics. It
Hmm.
was still 3D and you know but so yeah it was a small project and you know it came out decades ago now. So yeah, so that was the first one.
Well,
So yeah,
I just think I think it's fun though. You get to say like I worked on Kingdom Hearts, but I mean you've worked on all these other ones though, so it's like I mean what's that like having to step into kind of like the middle of a franchise? Because some of these you've kind of stepped into like the middle of the franchise. They kind of called you in and you started working on it on the middle. Some of them you got to do it from the beginning, and some you were kind of in the
yeah.
middle.
Well, that's a kind of a typical thing because they'll, you know, sometimes they'll have the same development team working on the sequel. Sometimes it'll be a totally different team. Sometimes it'll be like years later.
Uh-huh.
So starting like for instance, like Command and Conquer, I had played those. I just kind of loved them, and Red Alert, which you know, and they both kind of inspired me to try to get into game writing because they seemed they were like closer to movies in a way because they used real film footage in the games.
Hmm.
And I think the fact that I was such a fan of them and knew them so well that when I went in and interviewed and talked to the people at EA about working on Red Alert 3, they knew I knew all the characters, I knew the history, and so that really helped. And part of I kind of like figuring out how to talk, how to write characters that are pre-established, how to talk, how to write in those voices, and it's that's just part of the job, honestly. You
Yeah.
just kind of, it's like an actor, right? It's not that different. You kind of learn who the character is and you become that character. So I
Yeah.
kind of do that as a writer. So,
Well, and so we have Andrea Hintz here. Welcome, Andrea. Andrea's a wonderful support of other people always, and also your fellow spy person. She also wrote a wonderful spy series. She said,
oh,
"How long or how many times should you submit a spec screenplay before it goes in the drawer?"
that's a tricky one. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. It took me 7 years before I sold my first screenplay. So I just kept writing them and kept submitting them, and it took a while before I sold my first one. And I think you never give up on it, honestly.
Uh,
You know, you just the hard part, honestly, for a screenwriter is getting an agent. That's it's true of
mhm.
novelists too, but you can kind of survive as a novelist without an agent. As a screenwriter, it's pretty difficult because
Yeah.
they're really
Same with
kind
the
of
acting. Acting's
yeah,
like that.
they're firm gatekeepers there.
Hmm.
So, I mean, if you submit a spec a lot, everywhere you can think of, and it hasn't, no one's picked it up, you should always start working on your next one anyway. But I'd never give up, I would never give up on any of them because, eventually you sell something, those older ones may get picked out. That happens a lot.
Braver man than me. I have a chest. It's my writing coffin. I never throw any of my writing away, but I got a few in there that are I taken ideas from them, but they're never going to see the light of day. No one gets to
Well,
look at
yeah.
those.
Well, there's two of you know what? I have a lot of those too. I mean, some of it is at some point you may think, I don't, you may decide you don't like the script as much as you like your newer scripts. So you may decide to just like not submit it again. I mean, I've written a lot of scripts that I would not send out ever again. So I have a giant,
Now,
but
I want to read those. Actually, I was like,
yeah.
I should just do that one day. I might publish like Josh's junk or something, like Josh's junk folder. That's what I'm going to call it. So, all right. So you got your start with since we're talking scripts here a little bit, you got your start with kind of like the stage and creating
Right.
plays and that it's like my work on the stage has definitely influenced all my work afterwards. What were some of the biggest things the stage gave to your work?
I think it's I think it's difficult to write plays. To me, that's almost the hardest medium
Yeah.
because yeah, I find it difficult because you with a movie you can keep cutting to different scenes. You can move around. I mean, do the same thing in a book. You can go inside people's heads in the book. On stage it's like whatever. It's a much more kind of limiting medium in a way. But through that you discover lots of creativity that tell the story. People are much more willing to use their imagination. I think watching a play that doesn't have to be totally realistic. Sets and whatever can be kind of just suggestive. So when you learn that you can go in a lot more directions. You can use a lot more of the audience's imagination than you would like in a movie or books are kind of similar. And I found writing plays the closest medium to writing video games because their plays are kind of interactive. That you're with the audience is reacting to what's going on, and you're kind of having to direct. With the stage, you have to direct them where to look, where the audience where to look, and you do that with like sound and light.
Hmm.
Where with a movie, you can just cut to a close up, and the audience is looking exactly where you want them to look. Where in a video game, the player gets to decide where they want to look. So you have to kind of treat it like you do the stage. You have to get their attention. So
Definitely. Well, and I
yeah,
connect with you on that. I'm going back to my stage days. Yeah, interactive. one night on the stage there, I was like back there, like waiting for my moment to come in behind the audience, and we were being interacted, like going through the audience. But I had an audience member like smash a door into my face. He thought I
Oh
was like
my God.
flying on the play, and I was like, I'm like bleeding and going on stage trying to do my line. It was fun.
That's very interactive.
It's
Yeah.
very much like a video game. You never know what's going to happen. So when they mod the game or something. And so, all right. So what made you to decide to take a stab at writing a video game?
Well, I started playing them with my son, and this was like in the late '90s, and I really had fun. I'd played them in bars and like on consoles, early ones, and I just really liked them. And they started to get more and more sophisticated. But I did see that a lot of the writing and a lot of the voice acting was like really horrible in some of those early titles, and I thought they probably could use help in this area because there weren't really people who had like my training at most video game companies, right? They were,
It was programmers that were
programmers,
basically writing it.
or artists, but not necessarily people with like theatrical backgrounds who had written plays and directed and stuff like that. So, um, I got so I kind of broke in. I got really good at this one game called Soldier of Fortune 3. I got good at it. Do you know that game? I got good at it.
Yes, I do know that one. You're giving me all the good throwbacks. I'm getting the tingles, all the feels here.
It was a gory game, actually. You could, like shoot someone's head off with a shotgun. It was like at the time that was like pretty disgusting. So, but I've been playing Counter-Strike with my son, and he'd been kicking my ass all the time. He was just so much better than I was. We actually even went on this.
So you decided to write a game so you can beat him? Like, I need to write a game so he doesn't beat me at the game anymore. I'm going to make it
that would have been good, actually. But no, I just would stay up late at night and just play after he went to bed until I got really good. But it was just that I got really good at that one game. So good that I was like one of the top 100 players in the world, actually. And I was like playing in, with clans against other competitions. And we even went on like a TV show that was called Arena, where people played video games against each other. My son went on there with me, actually.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, G4 Network it was. So I met the guy who wrote the game, and he knew I was a screenwriter, and he asked if I could help him meet any people in that world. And so we traded information. I said, yeah, if you kind of give me some names of people I could talk to in the video game world. And so I started taking people out to lunch, working at Blizzard and Atari and all these different companies. And eventually one of the, just to pick their brains really about how it worked. And one of them finally decided to hire me for that first Dungeons and Dragons game. And then from there, I kept going to E3 and I went to the Game Developers Conference, and I just started meeting people, and I was eventually got hired for the next thing and the next thing. I went at E3. I met this Polish company called Techland. They were just starting out, right? And they had done a game. They were trying to make a Western game, and I suggested to them that they should probably hire an American writer to help them, because I had played one of the previous games and the gameplay was great, but the writing and the voice acting was horrible. So and so I was the only American writer they knew. They just said, "All right, why don't you do it then?" So that's how I started writing the Call of Juarez series, and then I went on to write all the rest of them in the series, and they, Dead Island, and then Dying Light, and I also recorded all the VO for all those games.
Which that's so awesome, and I love that you were able to do that, because it's like, as a writer, it's like often you'll have this idea of what the voice is, and you can have some insight into that, and so it's nice that you get to kind of do both the voice acting piece of it too.
Well, that seems to me that's like part of the writing process, the casting and the it's like it really affects the acting. So and I had done a lot of voiceover directing for for commercials and for animation. So, and I had this studio, so I was all set to go. And I knew a lot of the voice actors in LA, so a lot of the agents, so I was kind of all set up to do that.
Well, then I'll ask you this question. I was going to ask this later, but so So I used to act, but I never did any like real voice acting or anything. But my brother, like say is like my brother Nate did the voice acting for my zombie apocalypse trailer. For anyone that can watch that earlier on the trailer if they want, but or on the show on the channel. But like I got to direct it. I used to be an actor, but I was like, I don't really direct. And so what's your advice for like say like earlier people in that industry, because we have a lot of people that voice that are starting out in voice acting that watch this channel. Like what would be your advice for since you have a whole studio with voice acting, and it's like or you're part of a studio, so what would be your advice for anyone that's kind of like breaking into that industry? What would be one big piece of advice?
Well, I think the most important thing is to study as an actor, to learn how to be because it's not really as much about the voice as it is about the acting. And if you get that down, and you become a really good actor, then I think you can be a really good voice actor. So I would say that's the first thing. Because there's people I know who have like deep voices and think they can do voice acting, but they don't have any acting chops. So that's important. So and I think working in theater is a good background for it. And then you have to kind of decide where you want to try to get into the industry. I mean, with COVID, it's been a lot easier for actors to work remotely and record remotely. Where before that, you really had to be able to have a voiceover agent and go in there and like audition for parts. So I don't know. I would say we actually have a voice acting school at our studio, but there's a couple in LA that are good. And I think it'd be good to go and like kind of take classes with someone who teaches voice acting who is legitimate, because there's a lot of ones who are not legitimate and they're just kind of scam artists who just but if you find someone who's legitimate, and kind of put together a reel of and then you can try to submit it and try to get an agent.
I think it's gonna be my goal now to set up the Joshua Grant illegitimate voice acting school.
I think that's
talent. I'll
fact,
become your illegitimate agent or whatever.
If you just called out that right from the beginning, you'll get a lot of people.
I probably would actually. So Andrea, by the way, always very kind, very supportive. She also does a lot of voice acting and hires voice actors for books and interviews people in the entertainment industry. It says Josh and his brother are great voice actors. Oh wow, she's shouting me out. That's nicer. Nice. Super talented. I disagree with her. I don't think I'm that great of a voice actor, but whichever. I sent her some of my clips when we were practicing, trying to find the voice for our for my trailer, and I'm just over there like the universe is infinite. It's like trying to get the right tone. So, go ahead.
Honestly, just talking to you, I can tell you probably are pretty good at it.
I don't know.
And part of it is that I have to listen, but part of it's just keeping that looseness, and being able to improvise and and it's just not being stiff about it. It's
well, and back in my theater days, that's what I took from the theater. It's like it just in life in general, it's all about the tone. It's all about finding the right tone. If you can find the right tone, everything comes from there. It's like the rudder on the ship; it moves the whole thing. But just a couple more here about games, and then we're going to jump into your books. I really want to focus on your book. I want to make sure our audience gets a chance to hear some of that. So because I really want to connect you. It's a really good book, and I had a lot of fun with it. It's like it's a good action book, and it's like really fun, like funny, and I thought it was great that you mentioned Don Quixote. I actually never really weirdly made that connection even after reading the book, and it really is actually a really good retelling of Don Quixote, which is fun because I was I'm a best-selling comic creator. My best-selling comic is The Lost Boy, and I was looking for a fantasy or for a fairy tale to retell in a modern time in like a gritty way. And I was looking for one, and one of those I looked at was Don Quixote, and I was like, oh, maybe I could do Don Quixote, but then I landed on Peter Pan, and it's like Peter Pan is a vigilante crime fighter, but like,
that's great.
But it's so I think that's actually fun because yours actually is kind of like a modern retelling of Don Quixote, which I think is really fun. But before we get there, just one last thing. So you've written all these popular games, right? Like Dying Light. Again, my nephew absolutely loves that one. Like Tom Clancy's the Division. Mafia 3 was nominated for a BAFTA award. So what was what's your feeling when you like see that, when you see success for your games, or when you see that they're popular, or you're walking along and you see it up on a billboard or something? It's like, what's that feeling that it gives you? Because writing is fun, so I want to hear a little bit about what do you
Yeah.
feel?
Well, as a first of all, usually like on those really big games like the Division of Mafia 3,
Hmm.
I'm part of a writing team
Yeah,
usually,
yeah.
So, it's almost like being on a staff of a TV show.
Hmm.
You're because they're all writing different parts of it because it's so huge. Though
Yeah,
there are a few games I've written, I was the only writer, but most of the time for the big ones, I'm part of a team.
yeah.
And you know what? I just feel great when it does. I mean, I just worked on this game called Shadow Warrior
Yeah,
3.
Shadow Warrior 3
It
I
just,
saw
it,
there
yeah, it
too.
just came out, and it's tough looking at reviews because some are good, some aren't good. And
Yeah, I
but
know it's hard anytime you do reviews. It's like you're
yeah,
always going to get people that'll trash your work, and it's like your children, right? It's like, no.
yeah, and when you do humor, especially, it's very subjective. So some people love it, some people hate it. So but it just feels really good. Honestly, I feel good for the whole team because games are such a collaborative medium. It's like it takes an army of people, to make a good game sometimes. Though there are some made with very tiny teams. Like I worked on this game called Ghost Runner, which I think, and another game called Ruiner, which I think were like 5-person teams for both games.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, they're both indie games. But I just feel, it makes me feel great. It's like, oh, okay, well, I succeeded with something, but I'm always kind of moving on to the next thing. I don't, I can't sit there and bask in the glow of that for too long. It's like, because it's like that's my how I make my living and stuff. So
Hmm.
it's like, all right, I'm on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And when you write anything or create anything, it always feels like, well, some of it could have been better. I could have done something better. So this next one will be really good. So that other one was okay. It was okay. It turned out pretty good. It turned, some of them turned out great, but maybe this one will be my magnum opus, right? So
That's how you know you're an artist. I always
yeah,
say you know you're an artist or a writer when it's like it's always just like, oh, no, that was okay, but I think it'll be better. You're always like, oh, it'll be better, and it's that
yeah,
writing bug. It's the fire in which we burn. So
yeah.
so moving on into book world here, I guess we'll transition from gaming into writing. Just one last thing, I guess, for gaming is for myself anyway. Like I just got into game writing. I actually kind of connect
Mm.
with you on that. Mine was a Hungarian company actually. It's an indie game, but they wanted some help on a game on just like tidying up the writing, I guess,
Oh, that's great.
because of the
Yeah.
dialogue. So that's I actually I love video games, but I guess I never considered writing one because I'm not too keen on the programming side, so I don't know as much about that side. And so but they asked me to tidy it up, so I started doing that, and now we're developing a game together, which is really cool. But for someone
Wow.
like me who's just maybe starting to or thinking about getting into the world of video game writing, like what would be a piece of advice that you have?
Well, I don't think, first of all, you don't really need to know programming or any of that kind of stuff to write games. It's like you don't need to know how to be a cinematographer to write movies.
Okay.
So, but that said, some jobs you get they want you to implement the the dialogue into the game occasionally, and it might be good to like learn how to operate in those game engines like Unreal 2.
Uh-huh.
Just get like a very takes like some Udemy tutorials or whatever, just kind of learn the basics. And then I think that will help you in terms of when you're especially creating something new to know what's possible in a game and what isn't possible. Because each game is its own thing, and each the mechanics are different. The game engine can do certain things, so it kind of helps you realize where your imagination can go, what you can do that makes sense, that's affordable, because it's like writing a movie. You can't have like a million
Yeah.
locations or
Yeah.
a million actors. You have to kind of, and it's true of games too. All the assets have to be created. Every actor you put in there, every character has to be voiced and created, and you know and it takes like a whole army of people to make those, like concept artists and
Hmm.
animators. And so you just have to, the more you know about that, the better. But you'll learn that as you do it,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, with your background, there's a lot of comic artists, comic writers who go into video games. That seems to be an area too. The main people I see in game writing are, for the most part, are people who are like D&D people who've done that, right?
Yeah, dude.
And
I got my dice.
yeah,
So I got my dice right over here somewhere.
right. And
My
I'm
phone
not
anyway.
I'm not a
So.
D&D person, so when we're always
You
sitting
are
at
because you wrote one of the D&D games or
I
helped play
did.
on
No,
that.
I guess
So
I am. But they all talk to me about it. I'm looking at them blankly because I don't know what they're talking about. And yeah, and the other and the other are like people who work in comics actually, because it's I don't know why necessarily, but a lot of them seem to be in video games.
yeah, well,
Um,
I think I definitely connect with you. I appreciate actually, Harris, like telling our audience because, like I said, we have a lot of people that are younger in the industry or new to
mm,
the industries and like wanting to break into different industries. I love that that takeaway of like sometimes it's just try it out and see, and it's some of that will to go in and learn and wanting to learn and don't let things be your barrier, I guess.
oh yeah, well that's true. I mean, the truth is, I knew nothing about it, and I'm always hired for
And
things.
still don't nudge.
And I honestly, so I don't. It's like kind of fresh. I don't know what's that. Or, my mind's kind of wide open. I'll go into a project. They'll ask me, do you know how to do this kind of thing?" And I'll be like, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." And I really don't know how to do it, but I figure I'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, I definitely connect with you on that.
Yeah.
When I was a novel writer, and that's what I did, and then I just had this weird idea, and I was like, that has to be a comic, and broke into the world of comics and became a bestseller that way, and a lot of that kind of carries over, kind of like what you said. It's like just like it all starts with that budget though. It's like thinking like, what's my budget and what can we do in that space, and it's part of the art. So well, let's talk now all about You Only Live Once is the first one in your series. You're about to have three. There's two of them right now, and so You Only Live Once. Here's the first lines of the book, and then we're going to talk all about it. So this is a cool spy series, but it's also got a lot of humor to it. The waxing moon gave off a cold white light that Flynn avoided by staying in the shadows. He heard the faint harmony of dogs howling with a distant siren as he knelt below a tree of heaven. And then the murders began. I was and with the first lines of that. So in a way, actually, yeah. Let's talk all about it. Let me actually bring it back up here, like your cover. You
Oh,
can
okay.
see a great cover. It really kind of captures some of that feel of the book, a little bit of that kind of pop art in a way. And give us just kind of like the brief overview of You Only Live Once and the whole series.
Okay. Well, so like I mentioned before, it's basically an updated version of Don Quixote about this mental patient in Pasadena who believes he is a double O and that he has a license to kill, and that this mental hospital is kind of a satellite secret office of Her Majesty's Secret Service, and that the other
Which is
patients
actually true of all
mental
institutions.
hospitals. That's how they
Yeah.
do it. And then the other patients are people in the service as well. Like there's one old guy who's like in his 80s who he calls Q, and Q is his delusion is that he has invented almost everything from like liquid paper to he just believes he's invented a million things. So he seemed like the perfect Q. There's a woman in the institution in the first book. Her name is Dulce, and Dulce is kind of based on Dulciana and Don Quixote,
Hmm.
and he's the one that he ends up rescuing. What happens is a new HMO takes over the hospital, and a lot of the patients are gone one morning when Flynn wakes up, and there's like new management, and they're medicating the patients more, and Flynn feels like someone has taken over Her Majesty's Secret Service, and that these people are in danger, including his psychiatrist, who calls N, who he thinks is M basically. And so when they disappear and some of those patients disappear, Flynn decides he needs to escape the mental hospital to figure out what happened to everyone. And so he ends up carjacking an orderly whose name is Sancho, like Don Quixote, and they go on this adventure they eventually bump into an actual supervillain with an actual plot to to take over the world.
And that's why
And
I thought it was fun. I was like, I don't want to spoil too much of it because it's like I thought it was fun because it definitely has these like twists in it. When I read it years ago here, and it had these twists to it. I thought it was fun. I thought you had a great balance of like action, humor and even you know, depth in there. And so it's like it was like this nice little mixture. And I love this series and its mashup of genres. So, and you've already touched on this a bit. So, what were your big inspirations? You kind of said like Don Quixote and Bond. Was there any other big inspirations that kind of fed into this?
Well, I love I loved thriller writers, but I also love comedy. And I love, Kurt Vonnegut was like a big inspiration to me. So, there's probably a little bit of elements of that. Joseph Heller, I just like comic novels, and I wanted to ground this in reality. So it felt like each step along the way, you're believing what's happening, all the way to the point where you're actually facing a real supervillain who also is like, I try to sketch and as a real person, kind of ground him in reality with his own foibles and his own problems and his own motivations for doing what he's doing. It's like I wanted him to be as believable as because every villain believes they're the hero of their own story. So,
Yeah.
and that's kind of my philosophy for all the characters in it. They're all the hero of their own story. They're all delusional in their own way. I mean, and that's kind
Maybe
of
that's why I liked it so much.
yeah.
I'm a delusions of grandeur on this channel here.
Well, that's it. That's kind of the main theme of it. Is like, I mean, just look around in the world. It's like everyone seems to be living in their own
Of the
information
world.
bubble, right? Their own
Mhm.
delusion of what they think the world is. And who's to say whose delusion is more real? At some point.
I on this channel, it's my delusion. Okay, so
Exactly. You get to decide. That's why you
it's
have a
my
channel.
world. No, so how does writing for novels differ than writing for video games, or does it?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, it's very different than writing movies and writing, plays as well. So it was really difficult for me at first. I mean, I read tons of novels, and I thought, well, I could write a novel, but there was a lot I had to learn writing that first novel, and I worked with an editor who kind of helped me, just in terms of like point of view and shifting points of view and just how to, how to tell the story and how to like the early books I was like doing something called head hopping,
Yeah.
where I was just so going from conscious to consciousness, and I finally changed it, which helped the book a lot, where each section is just from one point of view, which was important because you know Flynn's has his own delusional point of view, and then we see each other person's point of view, some more delusional than others. So, and it was good to see the juxtaposition of all those points of view. Yeah,
Well, interesting. And so I'm curious from you, like, because I do this in books. It's like, especially my horror books. I had it where it was like, my novels is like, I was like, I had these rules where I was like, every other chapter has to switch between these two main characters. So it's kind of like it was really tight with their perspective. Whereas other books, you can kind of be more nebulous and just be like jumping around a little bit if it helps their
yeah.
story. But it's like, so what did you set up any specific like rules in your own head when you were writing it?
So that was one of the rules. Yeah, I would switch, though I didn't limit myself to just two perspectives. I kind of went to whatever perspective made the most sense, and actually just was the funniest in terms of comedy. Because with comedy, a lot of the comedy comes from the reactions
Hmm.
of the other characters to the person doing the crazy stupid thing, and so I had to kind of build up those reaction shots in the book, kind of in a way, by changing points of view. Um, but that honestly, I think that was probably it. I didn't want to get too graphic with violence. I wanted to keep it pretty light with that. So I purposely try to do that, but still keep it feeling real. Though I do, people do die, and but I just don't get too graphic with it. Though the newest book, well, actually, it'll be the fourth book in the series, which I'm almost done with. Just because James Bond movies, there's often a torture scene with James Bond. I decided I needed to put a torture scene in book 4. It would still be a kind of a funny torture scene, but but it's definitely a torture scene. And but if you look at Casino Royale,
Yeah.
right, that's directly from Casino
That's
Royale, the book, right?
such an uncomfortable scene there.
It is, that's just like that's exactly the scene in the book. And so I kind of created something that had some similarity to that for the fourth book. Though I love, I don't know, there's something fascinating to me about old torture devices and the medieval torture devices. And I went to Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum, and they had all those. And
Yeah, it just makes your skin crawl as
right,
they
right.
go through. It's
So
like,
yeah, so I created a character who just is into all the history and sees himself as a modern Torquemada, and just kind of loves the history of torture, and and
it's like
likes like
interesting characters. I was like, I love it's like it's a great character driven book. It's like you
mm,
got these interesting characters, and so like I would ask you though, is like what's like the hardest part of this book to write for you, or what was the hardest part?
um, I would say keeping it grounded, and making sure that Flynn's mental illness wasn't played for as a joke
Hmm.
necessarily. I wanted that to feel kind of real, and I wanted the reactions of people around him about that to feel real. So, and I've gotten reviews like that where people say, it's kind of sad too. It's funny, and it's exciting, but there's like an underlying sadness to it, and and I kind of liked that, but it was hard to like thread the needle with that for me.
Hmm.
So.
Well, and I thought that was one of the things I thought was actually interesting when I read it years ago and reviewed it years ago. It was just interesting to me, like again your balance of that. I was like, okay, it's got action, it's like fun James Bond. It's got this like humor to it. But the thing that actually stood out to me especially was actually that what I would call depth, right? It's like you had that depth in there, and it did kind of come to that with that kind of realism a little bit with like mental illness and how it's treated, or and I thought that was actually really interesting, and I thought you balanced that actually really well.
Oh,
And
thank you.
so
Yeah.
yeah, because it's hard to like, especially if you're trying to be humorous but you also don't want to make light, it's like and so
Yeah.
it's like it is definitely a kind of a tightrope to walk, and I thought you did it really well. So like and like so you throw a lot of that fun and humor into the series. Like was that your plan from the start? Did you start out saying, "Hey, I want to write this really humorous novel," or is it more like when you kind of came up with the idea, you're like, "I want to blend the humor into it." Like how did you kind of decide that, I guess, that balance?
That was the tone of the screenplay,
Uh-huh.
initial screenplay idea, and
Hmm.
I right from the beginning. Part of it is I'm not whenever I write anything, there always seems to be humor in it anyway. I
Yeah.
can't seem to stop that, and so I figure it's going to be, and I honestly, for me to write a straight on thriller, it's hard for me. Even though I love reading them, I love like these gritty thrillers. For me to write one, I would be a little embarrassed to do that. It's like you know, I have to probably look at it from an angle and make fun of it a little bit because they are ridiculous. There's something ridiculous about thinking there's guys like that in the world who can just save the world by themselves. So
Yeah.
so I just thought, you know,
Well, you're talking to one again, Harris.
yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're there. I'm glad to be there. Yeah.
But well, that's great. I was like, well, and I always like connecting with you. I actually so I don't know why I got started writing horror books. I wrote this horror book that took place on a cruise ship. It's kind of like a ghost ship kind of thing. But it's
Mm,
like but I started writing it, and it's like it's dark, and that one's definitely dark, but it's like I had all this humor in there, and I was like, I
mm.
need to, but I had to actually like tone myself down. I had to go back and look at it, and I had to decide. I'm like, is this a very serious thriller, or do I want to have this humor in there? And it was gut wrenching to me because I'm actually a humorous guy. I love having humor in my stuff too. And I was like, I got to slash it just for that genre. So that was like the one that it was all serious. And it was actually kind of gut wrenching to write. It was like, cause it was like, oh, it's all serious. And it was all dark for like, like months and months trying to write that.
Yeah, well, I've worked on a lot of like games like that. One of the things, like when you write movies, they tend to pigeonhole you. You're a comedy writer, or you write
Yeah.
thrillers or whatever. With games, I've been able to write like a lot of horror games and like historical, like army, military. And though I've gotten to do a bunch of comedy as well. And so for those kind of games, I have to really I have to limit the amount of comedy because you don't want to break the tension.
Yeah, and that was
It
the
can,
hard thing. It was like
right. It
deciding
can
how
break the
much.
tension. Yeah.
So, all right, well, for your series, and I am especially since it was originally a script, I am assuming you'd like to see would love to see your series like put to film. Like what I guess what kind of movie would you have, and who would you love to play like James Flynn, your
Oh,
secret agent?
I do actually. I have it out with these producers. Were interested, so I have it with them, and they're shopping it around. But they're
Nice.
shopping it as a streaming series, which I like.
Okay.
I like that
I
idea.
could see that. That would actually be really fun to do, like episodic almost.
Right. And so I actually wrote like a pilot episode for them, and we'll see what happens. Having been in the entertainment business, it's a giant crapshoot. But
Yeah.
it would be nice. It would be great if something like that happened with it. So I sent them a list of people I thought would be good, but I think Benedict Cumberbatch is like I would see him. I mean, he'd be great because maybe because I watched him in Sherlock Holmes, and he kind of played an
Yeah.
insane Sherlock Holmes, but he has that. So you can see all these different layers in him, including the brilliance, but also the vulnerability and the insanity. And
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I think that's actually a perfect choice. Having
yeah,
read it myself, it's like
yeah,
I can definitely see that he really can capture that. He can capture that humor and eccentricity
yeah.
and that also that depth. He can really capture that really really well. So I think he would actually be a fantastic choice. So who do you think would kind of be a good choice for your villain?
Oh, it's I've, it's let me see. I should bring out my list actually, but what's his name? And I mean, I thought Antonio Banderas might be really good as,
Yeah, he always
you know,
he plays a good villain. I think
he
he
does, and he's good as Gallardo. He's this, and he can play this kind of bigger than life characters who is kind of has a giant ego, and but who is and also the actor? What's his name? Who is in No Country for Old Men? The Spanish actor.
I actually never
The
saw
name
it.
went out of my
So.
head.
But
I'm
well,
blanking, but
good.
yeah.
I'm glad I can ask you the hard questions. It's my job on the show. No, put
Yeah.
you to it.
See, you said you would ask me when I couldn't answer them. That's
Yeah, that's my job, my ultimate goal. So so over the course of your book, I mean, it's definitely changed a bit because you originally had it as like screenplay, and then you had to change it, which is challenging to do. I'm turning the Fifth Ascendant, which is my big brick of a fantasy book, but I'm turning it into a comic, and
oh
it's kind of like the reverse order, turning a novel into a screenplay. Because a comic is basically a screenplay, but it's like it's really really challenging to jump between that. So I'm curious, like what were some of the big changes over the course of writing your book, and did you always plan on turning it into a series, or was it originally just supposed to be a standalone?
no, originally it was a standalone. I didn't
Uh-huh.
really, but once it was out there, I thought, oh yeah, I could. I mean, obviously the Bond movies were all series, so I thought I started thinking about how to turn it into a series. From that point on. So basically, what I did, I mean, honestly, I think it improved a lot turning into a book. And when I went back to write the pilot for for that producer, I added a lot of stuff that I put in the book that weren't in the original screenplay, which was a lot of the more character depth.
Mm-hmm.
You just have a lot more time in a book to
Yeah.
really get into the
Yeah.
characters, right?
Which I
So
find interesting going the other way, because it's like trying to figure out what to cut, because you can add so much depth to all these things, and then it's like putting in a screenplay. It's like, how do I capture all that, but also cut? What do I cut? It's kind of so it must be actually really fun to go the other way and actually be able to expand.
yeah, I think that's easier, honestly. I just worked on a game. I can't. They haven't announced it yet, so I
Mm-hmm.
can't say what it is. But it's based on this really well-known movie, and so I had to figure out how to compress the movie down because it's actually part of an episodic game, and
Uh-huh.
I had to cut it down, and it was difficult, and I had to make it interactive, and that was tricky. Maybe I'll come on sometime once that's released. I can
Yeah,
tell you about
definitely.
that.
I was like, come back
Yeah,
on and let me know.
yeah,
I'll talk games with you all day. So I was like,
yeah.
yeah. So, like like how much of a series do you kind of want to do with You Only Live Once in the James Flynn series? It's like a like is there kind of like a cutoff in your mind, or is it kind of like James Bond where you can see yourself revisiting it quite a bit?
Yeah, I don't really. Right now, I'm thinking I'll do 6 books. Right, I have the fourth one just about done. I'll maybe do 2 more, and then maybe work on some other things, maybe another series even. But eventually, I wouldn't mind coming back to it. I just love the character,
Mm-hmm.
and if I can, I just don't want to get to the point where I'm just retreading old stuff. I'm just repeating myself. I don't want to do that. Writing a series, that's the other thing. Writing a series has proven pretty difficult
Yeah,
for
well,
me.
I give you
Yeah.
kudos. I was like, that was something I found like I love starting series. I have a hard time finishing any of my series. I have all these series started and I know where they're going,
Mm.
but it's like I found it's actually harder to write like a sequel than it is. Although yours is like a little bit in a sense easier because you can kind of capture some of these like Bond feels in a way, and each one's its own separate kind of story.
Yeah.
But so it's like it's kind of nice to be able to do that, but it's like, but you do have to kind of continue. You have to grow the character, and it's hard. It's hard to do over time.
Yeah, and it's not though. There's some series that are just are repeating over and over again, and the readers seem to like that. It's
Yeah,
comfortable for them. So,
more of a good
but
thing is always a good thing if you ask me.
yeah, but I just don't want. It'll get boring for me eventually. So,
Hmm.
I just want to make sure I have. And each time is finding the right supervillain person. The antagonist. That's almost the hardest thing is finding a worthy antagonist
Hmm.
for Flynn. So.
Well, and so I'm curious from you, since we're running a little bit low on time. I'm just curious. Is there another series you would love to turn into to novels, or is there like what's one of those scripts that you have buried away in a drawer that you would just love to see come to life?
Well, I do have one that it's 2 of them actually that I want to turn into novels. So, I mean, that is something you can do with them too. So, yeah. So, I probably don't have enough time for me to go into what they are, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's two of them that, one's kind of a Christmas story and one's like a straight on kind of thriller based on like the idea of the Dirty Dozen.
Oh,
Except,
fun.
yeah,
Fun. I like that. I was like,
yeah.
I was actually just watching that the other day. I was like, oh, fun. And
Oh,
so,
yeah, I love those movies. Yeah.
well, so all right. And my last question for you, is are you secretly James Flynn, secret agent? Because I believe it with your career after everything you've done. I'm pretty sure it's an
Yeah, no,
autobiography.
no. Though I tried, I did. I went and got I have a black belt in Taekwondo, and I'm a certified scuba diver, and I went to school in England for a year. But it's like, no, I just became someone who writes like fantasies of it. Didn't actually become that thing. Yeah.
So, well, I was like, well, you and I are gonna scoop next time on the channel. We'll scuba dive and fight black belt fighting while we talk about your book. Yeah,
All right,
it'll
cool.
work. So, well, Harris, I was like, I can never get to as much as I want to get to on the show. I was like, time flies when you're talking games and books, and so I'm just curious from you for our readers again. Just you can catch Harris's work, both his games and his books. There's links to down in the description. Yes,
There we
hold them
go.
up
Yeah, hold
always.
them up one more time.
Definitely check them out. They're fun, and that's the word I would use to describe them. Fun. They have that depth. They have that action. But Harris, how else can we support you? We're a very supportive community. How else can we support you in your writing?
I think that's it. If you pick up the books and hopefully have fun with them because they are meant to be just. I just love movies that are just fun. It's
Uh-huh.
like, and there aren't enough of them around. Honestly, sometimes. That's what I liked about the Mandalorian. Actually, that to me was like really fun. That streaming show. So, I. So that's it. If you try out the first one and see if you like the series. That would be the best way to support me.
Definitely. Well, I would recommend it. Well, Harris, I'm gonna send you back below to the lower dimensions here. So, but
Okay.
thank you so much for being on Diabolic Shrimp.
All right. Thank you for having me.
All right,
Yeah.
hang out for just a sec. So, well, that was Haris Orkin again. Just fantastic guy. Lots of great writing, lots of great games and scripts. And again, check out all of his work down below. If you stumbled upon this channel, I love being interactive with people. I love connecting with you. So please do support us by hitting that subscribe button down below. Hit that like button. It's a free thing you can do to support us. Andrea Hintz says, great show, Josh. Thank you very much, Andrea. Andrea, always great to have you. Again, check out her stuff as well. And and if you want to support me, you can check out my books and that Kickstarter. If you're a zombie fan like myself, if you were watching this because of Dead Island or Dying Light, then definitely check out that Kickstarter down there and consider being drawn in as a zombie. But thank you so much for spending a bit of time with us. Definitely comment on there. I'll share that with Haris if you're catching this later. But this has been another Diabolic Shrimp. Have a good night.